Hello and welcome back to the channel where once again it's time for another first impressions video in my Dreamcast series, with us being on episode 9 today, and we're taking a look at a 3D scrolling beat 'em up that was exclusive to the Dreamcast known as Soul Fighter. It first saw release in November of 1999 in North America and was followed by a power release in December. It did not get released in Japan.
I had organized for his birthday. Overcome with grief,
So, to summarize the story for Soul Fighter briefly, an evil spell from Queen Anthea has fallen on the land of Gomar, and a mysterious mist has enveloped the whole kingdom, with the inhabitants turning into vicious creatures. A warrior known as Atlas, a female spy called Sayomi, and a powerful wizard called Orion, though, have all escaped the fate of their fellow villagers, and now they must search for and capture the souls from all of these monsters in the land in order to reverse the curse.
Soul Fighter.
So once the main menu comes around, you'll see you've got a choice of new game, load game, and options. There isn't really much to change in options. You can choose between arcade or adventure mode, check the controls, and choose between mono or stereo audio.
Choose your warrior.
So once you hit the character selection screen, you'll see you've got your three fighters: your standard warrior style character Atlas, your more speedier female character Sayomi, and the magical user Orion. So if you are new to my first impressions series, what I do is I play through a game for around about 60 to 90 minutes that I've never put any meaningful time into previously, before summarizing my first thoughts based on visuals, sound, how it plays, what kind of content and lifespan I think it has, and if it's a game I'm going to come back to and play more of before awarding it a final grade. Like always, I'm going to start with visuals first, and I feel the game's kind of got this solid, rigid kind of square look almost to it in some of the scenery. It's actually quite similar to some N64 games in that regard, mainly Zelda Ocarina of Time in my own opinion, and I actually like the visual style of the game. Obviously it runs at a much higher resolution, it's much sharper, more detailed, textures are much better than anything you'd have seen in the previous generation, and you have to consider it is a very early Dreamcast game. I actually find the aesthetic quite appealing because it's got this sort of Golden Axe feel to it. It almost feels like it could be a next generation sequel to the Golden Axe games. I feel the character models look reasonably good for the time, and the enemies don't look too bad either. What I do think is very good though is the animations for the characters. All of the animations are actually motion captured, and the punches and the kick combos that your characters pull off actually look really good. The game runs at 60 frames per second, so it is actually quite a smooth running game, but it's not all positive. In fact, there are a few negative things, with the absolute biggest one being the terrible camera. It is absolutely awful. It seems incapable of following the action smoothly, and it's constantly spinning around whilst you're fighting. It's actually quite disorientating, and this for me is the biggest problem with the game visually. Of course, that's not the only problem visually, because there are a few niggles I feel in terms of some of the animations. The characters don't look particularly good when they're running, and you get an infuriating stop kind of animation when you want to stop running. It's not very fluid, and it just feels a little bit stiff. Just like when you get knocked down by an opponent, you have to put up with this terrible animation of your character falling to the floor fairly slowly. It's just a little bit irritating. So I feel overall, in terms of visuals and performance, the game is a bit hit and miss.
Go.
So moving on to the sound effects and music next, and I'm going to start by saying that the narrator at the start of the game sounds remarkably similar to Sean Connery, and that's no bad thing. His tone of voice actually fits this time period very well. In terms of the actual sound effects within the game, they're actually okay. Everything sounds reasonably good. Punches, kicks, all of your weapon hits, they don't sound particularly realistic, but they fit the game perfectly fine. And actually the game has a few decent musical tracks, certainly that I've experienced so far at least anyway, but there is one huge problem with the game in terms of its music, and that is the fact that every time you run into enemies, a particular battle theme starts playing, and it happens over and over and over again, and it continually interrupts the stage music, which is then reset back to the beginning after you've finished fighting. And because enemies pop up every 7 or 8 steps after you've moved on from one batch to the next, it becomes very, very frustrating, and it's very, very repetitive. It is actually a very irritating part of the game overall. But regardless of that, I will still give you some samples of the music that I've experienced so far. So moving on to the gameplay next, and the first thing you have to understand is that the wild, uncontrollable camera has a massive impact on the gameplay, and it's a very negative impact. When you couple this with the fact that you cannot specifically target each enemy, it makes hitting them somewhat hit and miss, because it can be very frustrating when you start punching and enemies move around and you're just punching thin air. It's actually very, very frustrating, and a lot of the time as well you'll be targeting an enemy, or attempting to at least, and then another one just comes up and punches you or stabs you in the back with their weapon. It's pretty infuriating to control. Now in terms of your moveset, it's not actually too bad. You've got a punch, a kick, an action button and a jump button, and you can sling together a variety of combos which are pretty impressive. You've got a weapon that you can pull out and use for a certain amount of time as well. You can also collect additional weapon items, and you've got a special bar that enables you to pull off a powerful special move should you choose to. All of that is actually quite good, and the actual animations for the combos look really good as well, like I mentioned earlier on. But the frustrating aspect is undoubtedly the camera and the inability to target enemies specifically. Now you've got 2 modes of play as well, arcade and adventure, but they don't really differ in terms of gameplay. Your arcade mode gives you 5 lives to play through the game with, but you can't save the game and you have to play through it all in one go, except you can change character at the end of each level. If you pick the adventure mode, however, you'll only get 1 life, and you must play through the game with the same character, although you can save it at the end of each level. It's actually quite frustrating that they've gone about it this way. I think it would have been much better with just 1 standard game with 5 lives and the ability to save your progress as you go along. I think the way they've done it just makes it quite frustrating to play in either mode. So overall, I feel the game is just a very frustrating experience in terms of gameplay. So moving on to content and lifespan next, and you've obviously got 3 characters to play as, with a fairly wide variety of moves on offer for each character. There's 12 levels to play through, with a varying number of souls to rescue and enemies to defeat on each stage, and I guess it would probably take around about 2 hours to play through from start to finish if you could put yourself through it, and that really is a big if. In fact, when I just got to level 2, I found big problems in terms of progressing because I defeated all of the enemies in the area, yet I could not find any way at all to progress to the next section of the map. Now, this doesn't strike me as the kind of game that I would need to look up a guide to find out where I needed to go next, and I actually got frustrated, reset the game and input the level select code so that I could just start on level 3. It was a pretty frustrating experience overall, but of course the biggest problem in terms of content and lifespan is the fact that there is no 2-player option. Scrolling beat-em-ups like this are made to be multiplayer games, and the fact that this is only a 1-player experience is a terrible drawback for the game. I cannot overstate it enough because it is a huge downside for the game that it is only a 1-player experience. So like always, that leaves me with my 2 final questions. Is Soul Fighter a game that I'm going to return to and potentially try to complete? And what final grade am I going to give it? Well, I can tell you right now that I'm never going to bother playing this game ever again. Whilst it's the kind of game in terms of style and setting that I enjoy, the way it plays and the horrible camera and the fact it's not a 2-player just mean it's not worth playing ever again, in my opinion. Now, in terms of an overall grade, it's going to get an E for extremely crap. It's the worst game I've looked at so far on the Dreamcast, easily, hands down. But of course, these are just my thoughts and my thoughts alone. Did anybody out there buy this upon release when it came out in 1999 on their Dreamcast and actually enjoy it, or did the terrible camera view put you off just like it did me as well? Let me know with your thoughts down below, and like always, I'll be back in the near future with another First Impressions video. Goodbye for now.